I saw something radically different when I was in Paris not too long ago. This was developed by a dermatologist, and it's a robot injecting product.
Welcome back to the Technology of Beauty. I'm Dr. Grant Stevens, and I'm here with Philippe Schaison. Did I get it right?
You did it.
Closer. Hey, thanks.
Very close.
So we're here at the Technology of Beauty where we talk to the titans of industry. We talk to the leaders, the movers and shakers of all things aesthetics and beauty. Welcome, Philippe.
Thank you, Grant. And it's an honor to be here today. And I'm looking forward to our chat.
So am I. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's start with that. Tell our audience a little bit about who you are, where you came from.
Well, as you can tell by my accent, born and raised in Paris, moved to the US many years ago, land of opportunities, and love it. I'm a consumer guy, pharma / consumer. I've been in that space for 25 years, maybe more. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking only for one thing, to have fun, to develop and market great technologies, and to work with amazing people to commercialize disruptive technology that will impact the life of many patients.
Fantastic. Now, you were at Allergan. Tell us a little bit about the time period we were talking about at Allergan, and take us through to where you're at today.
So Allergan was probably the love of my life. Phenomenal company, phenomenal products, phenomenal people. I was a commercial leader and a talent developer. Mm-hmm. And in my two roles, we market and commercialize disruptive technology that has a huge impact on patients. But I also had the privilege to work with extremely talented individuals. And one sentence that David Perrott told me when he hired me, said, "Philippe, you always have to hire people that are smarter and better than you." And he's right. And if you look at all the people that reported to me at Allergan, they are all today CEOs or leaders of major organizations. You're talking about David Modazetti, mm-hmm. Kerry Strom, Laurent Combraudet, Bob Radigan, and many others. And they are all now CEOs of traded public company or private. Mm-hmm. They're doing extremely well. And to me, when I see all my child, doing such great work, and when I listen to their quarterly earning release and how well they're doing, that makes me proud.
Yes, I bet. So you worked with David Pyatt. You were mentioning David said
David Pyatt hired me to run the aesthetic business at Allergan.
I wanted to be sure the French pronunciation of David Pyatt came through with our audience.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because he is certainly a titan. I would love to have him on this program. I had the good fortune of working with him for years also before activists purchased Allergan, and maybe we'll get to that. But okay, so you left Allergan in what year?
So I left Allergan 2 years after the acquisition by activists. Mm-hmm. I joined Syneron-Candela, which I transformed and groomed to be acquired by Apex, mm-hmm. which is a private equity firm out of London.
Yep.
And since then, I'm on the board of multiple companies, private and or public. And it's my second life. After being a commercial leader, I'm now a product developer. When you've worked for Allergan and when you shared so many exciting experience, the next step in your life is now to develop the technology that those large companies are going to develop. So I'm developing the future.
You're developing the future of aesthetics. So tell us about that. Let's just go right into the future, because this is the Technology of Beauty. Give us a look into the future. What does your crystal ball show you?
Some very exciting things. You have a lot of technologies that are short-term and some others are long-term. What's amazing is the difficulty that some big pharma have to develop and innovate. And they have to rely on startups and smaller organizations to develop the technology that they ultimately will commercialize. Mm-hmm. So we can talk about a few companies that are close to my heart or that I believe that will be game changer. The first one is S3 Inject, which you have heard about and who won the Innovation of the Year at IMCAS.
Right.
It's a needle that when is attached to a filler, when you inject, will detect if you're in a blood vessel or not. Presence of blood, meaning that it will improve adverse events drastically, which are not happening that often, but when they are, blood occlusion can create necrosis or even blindness. Now you have a safety device that will trigger a response, immediate response, say, hey, doc, don't inject because you are in a blood vessel. Mm-hmm. That's, to me, a major innovation.
Have you used that? Have you watched that being used? Are you involved in the company? I know they won.
I'm slightly involved with the company.
Okay.
Irina Ehrenberg is the CEO. The technology is coming from Harvard. Blossom Innovation is the incubator developing the technology. They are going to get a 510K towards the end of the year or early next year. Ultimately, they're going to partner with one of the big filler manufacturer. I'm not sure they're going to go commercial themselves.
Okay.
If I'm Allergan, Galderma, whoever has a filler, I will be dying to add that to my technology portfolio. It will help those companies in terms of training, being better and safer injectors. It's a safety device.
Right. I think the idea is also to minimize the complications, the intravascular occlusions, even blindness and necrosis and so forth. I would like to think if they do commercialize that it would be available to all of the manufacturers so that everyone's equally saved, but safe. But that's very interesting. What other technologies or devices do you see coming down the pike?
There are many technologies. I'm personally involved in a company called Soltego, which developed a SIK inhibitor, which when applied topically will trigger melanin production. So it's like a sunless tanner. So you now get a natural tan without exposing yourself to the sun. Mm-hmm. And there are 10 million women going to bed salon, UV bed salon every year. Imagine the risk they're taking by exposing themselves to UV lights. Now you can achieve the same complexion or coloring or tanning using a topical treatment.
Is that commercially available?
Not yet. We're going into clinical studies in human towards the fall. And ultimately, it's going to be developed for cosmetic applications, which could be available by the end of next year. And we're also developing a technology which will be an RX for vitiligo and some other pigmentation disorder.
So the idea is a sunless, a non-sun exposure addition of pigment to the skin.
Correct.
Okay. And
that's disruptive. There's nothing like that.
Very disruptive.
And
you mentioned 10 million women go to tanning salons. Correct. Is that in the United States?
That's
is that
in the US.
World? That's just the U.S.
The U.S.
And we know that increases the risk of UV cancers, melanomas, squamous cell, and even basal cell carcinoma. So that's very exciting, and that's in the beauty business. Will that come out as a cosmetic as opposed to a pharma?
Yes. Actually, we're going to develop two products. One, which is a cosmetic, and will be sold, in pharmacy or sold by dermatologists as a dispensing product.
Okay.
And one will be an RX, different product, but still a SIK inhibitor for pigmentation disorder such as vitiligo.
Will either one of them have to go through FDA trials?
Yes.
Both?
So no, only the RX one.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So there's a timing difference, as you can imagine, between the RX development and the cosmetic development.
Sure. And the timeline, again, for the one that won't have to go through the FDA?
The cosmetic will go into human clinical in November, December.
Okay.
So potentially, a launch towards the end of next year, if everything goes according to plan.
And will that be an acquisition prospect, or is that company going to actually distribute and commercialize the product?
We'll have to raise more money if we want to commercialize it ourselves. Mm-hmm. But I believe, as we discussed earlier, innovation is rare today. This is a disruptive technology. I will not be surprised if some pharma companies and or consumer group knock at our doors and say, okay, we're interested to commercialize the technology ourselves.
And where are they out of? Where are they located, this company?
So that's the beauty of all the startup. There's no physical presence. Everyone works remotely.
Okay.
And that's why in this COVID environment, the fact that we are, remote, we were able to continue the development of our products. We work with many different CROs. Chemistry is done in Spain. In vitro studies are done in Germany. Clinical is going to be done in France. R&D is done in France and in Boston. That's what makes us very resilient in an environment such as the one we live today, because there's not a specific space where people are bound to go to an office. And in this environment, as I said, you have to stay at home.
Yeah, the new reality, the post-COVID reality.
Yeah.
And we're seeing some advantages with efficiencies and so forth. So it's not all a disadvantage. Are you on their board? Are you management? How do you relate to this company?
I'm the CEO of the company.
Okay.
And on the board. And it's, as I said, it's disruptive technology. It's very exciting.
It's very exciting.
But you have a lot of other companies. I don't know. You might know
going.
Dive, transdermal technology. If you look at the toxin companies, they all tried to get a transdermal toxin, right? All failed. But
just for a moment, for the listeners, transdermal, he means to put something on the skin and get it through the skin or into the deep parts of the skin or into the muscle or even the bloodstream. So that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
A delivery system through the skin, the largest organ of the body. It's all right. Go ahead. So tell us about that.
I should have been more explicit.
No, that's okay.
So a lot of companies have tried and failed because larger the molecules, more difficult it is to go through the skin.
Sure.
But you have startups with brilliant scientists that crack the code and are able to take larger molecules and drive them through the skin through their proprietary technology. So you could imagine tomorrow that those guys are going to crack the code for a toxin or for any other large ingredient that will have required a needle and or an oral. Now it can be applied topically through a cream.
That's exciting.
Very exciting.
Can you imagine a world without needles? Or in fact, delivering drugs without the pain and actually the risk of needles? That's very exciting.
Absolutely.
Are you involved with Dive?
Yes, I'm on the board of Dive, yes.
Interesting. Okay, keep going. How about skincare? And we mentioned Laurent, and I didn't know that you were part of, Laurent was in your team when you were at Allergan.
Absolutely, you're right, Grant. Laurent was the CEO of Skin Medica, did a great job at that time, launched HA5 and some other disruptive technology. He left Skin Medica to run a skincare company called Sente. Heparin sulfate is the key ingredient in their line of products. And sold through dermatologists dispensing and plastic surgeons, mostly in the US. Again, disruptive technology.
How is Sente different than other skincare lines? What makes it unique? I
think today, if you look at all the big players, and let's take Skin Medica because I was responsible for it. It was the number one skincare dispensing brand in the US for many, many years.
Yes.
When you don't innovate, you lose your number one position. And now I think they're number two and they may be number three. So at the end of the day, if you don't bring innovation to the market, you lose your leadership, you lose your momentum. And a lot of brands like that have lost their mojo. You can talk about Obagi, you can talk about brands like that ultimately were leaders in their space, in their category, and they missed the beat. And now little startups that are more resilient, more innovative have won the momentum or some of the space that those big brands have lost. Alastin is a great example. Alastin and Sente for me are very similar companies and similar brand. They use different technology, but at the end of the day, they are in the forefront of innovation.
Right.
And their leaders truly understand what it takes and what is required to bring innovation to the physicians and ultimately to their consumers or their patients.
Have you seen any other emerging technologies or disruptive technologies as it relates to skincare? And then we'll move on from skincare. You've mentioned Sente, you mentioned Alastin, you've mentioned the other companies that with the pigment.
Yeah, Soltego.
Soltego is the one that with the pigment, correct?
Correct, SYK inhibitor.
Right.
It's hard to innovate sometimes in skincare. So the number of leaders in that space is limited, and Alastin, in my mind, and Sente are the two biggest innovators in that space.
I would agree.
Evita is one company that is probably not on your radar screen. It's an oncology company, and they have growth factors because they harvest stem cell from the skin, and they have a growth factors anti-aging skincare line. But they don't market it really because their primary objective is to treat cancer. But it's funny to see some companies that are not skincare company, but oncology company coming to the space with a skincare line. But then they don't have the commercial expertise, they don't have the resources, it's sometimes a distraction, so they don't do anything about it. But you see innovations, especially in skincare, coming from companies that you would have never guessed that they have a skincare product.
Interesting. It's really fascinating to me. You talk about Dive's ability to drive molecules through the skin. Are there any other companies that are doing this? And to the extent of Dive, and if so, and do you know the mechanism, or is that something that's proprietary?
It's
Can you
proprietary,
share that?
so okay. I'm sure you need an quote unquote an NDA to go into.
Right, sure.
But
to what extent? I mean, we think of the skin as the barrier. If we didn't have the skin, we'd evaporate to death. It's the largest organ in our body. We're moist on the inside. We're dry on the outside. So the skin is the barrier. And now you're suggesting that you can take larger molecules
Correct.
through the skin and into our deep skin or our bone, not our bone, our muscle, or even bloodstream.
Right.
That's fascinating to me.
So to tell you how important that is, a big pharma, and I'm not sure I can disclose the name, has signed up an agreement with Dive to develop drugs that are already on the market, but not as a skincare product or a topical treatment, to convert an oral treatment to a topical treatment.
Do you know off the top of your head how big the molecules are that they can do this with? Are they small peptides, or are they large molecules, or do you know?
Yeah, they can be large molecules.
Even as large as Botox?
That's their challenge, and I think they are eager to try to crack the code.
Interesting.
But I believe they could crack the code, which Allergan and Revance has not been able to do, because they have an expertise. It requires a specific expertise of the skin and all the vehicles that can go through the pores, and they have that expertise. And that's why if someone can crack the code of bringing a toxin through the skin, it's them.
That's a game changer.
Game changer.
You mentioned you were at Syneron-Candela for a while.
Right.
And so you do have experience with device. You're not just
Somewhat.
injections and topical. But when you look ahead, I don't know if you're working with any device companies now. You did mention Zeltique and Cool Sculpting earlier when we were talking. So when you think about the needs, the aesthetic needs, the marketplace, and the future innovation, can you think of any device or any needs that we need to solve? And do you have any insight as to what's out there in device?
Yeah, so I lost track a little bit of the device, but as you know, it's a phenomenal, it's an adjunct to all the other treatments that are offered by dermatologists and plastic surgeons. Mm-hmm. There's a huge demand for devices and new therapies. Body contouring is probably the number one unmet needs, even though Zeltique is doing a great job at providing great results. Hair loss and hair restoration is probably another area that is in high demand. Facial rejuvenation and body rejuvenation is also a big unmet need. And then you have the commodity, hair laser removal that you need, but how can you justify the price tag of such a device? Mm-hmm. The problem is a lot of those companies are publicly traded. With COVID and the fact that a lot of offices have closed, the price of each devices, they've been truly impacted, or some of them have been impacted. So it's a cyclic system. Mm-hmm. So they thrive for a few years and then they're impacted for 1 year, so investment collapse, and then it's back into business. So it's a very cyclic business. The question is, it's hard for this company to sell a device that is worth sometimes $150,000.
Yes, it's difficult.
And physicians are sometimes reluctant to spend that kind of money because you need the cash flow and you need the number of patients to treat to amortize such an expense. So I think the leaders of tomorrow are probably the people that are thinking out of the box on how to commercialize those devices, like some kind of rental agreement where I give you my device for free, but you pay me each time you use the device, a specific fee. Or you need to bring disruptive results. And there's a very interesting company actually out of Harvard and developed by Blossom Innovation. We talked about it, Rena Ehrenberg earlier, called Avava. Very early stage.
Avava?
Avava, A-V-A-V-A, okay. Avava. So it's being developed internally by Blossom. It's Rox Anderson technology, and Rox Anderson, as you know, was the brain behind Zeltiq.
And many other things. And probably more than anybody. In fact, I'm certain of it.
Yeah, you're right. So he's also the brain behind this technology, which originally was developed for melasma, and is now going into facial rejuvenation.
Is that the same as the R3 program to get rid of pigment?
No, I think it's different.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that.
Okay, well, I'll look into it. Tell me about cellulite. There's an unmet need. Do you have any inside information on treatments of cellulite?
So in a previous life, I was working for L'Oréal. Okay, and we had a skincare product for cellulite made of caffeine. Clinical efficacy of the product, close to zero. Revenue of that product, maybe worldwide sales, $300 million.
No kidding.
Okay. Just because if you look at in Europe during the March, April, May, June timeframe, if you look at the windows of pharmacy, they all advertise those skincare products from different brands. L'Oréal has a few for cellulite and orange peel, and lose 1 or 2 size of your jeans. And it's a huge market, huge business, huge unmet need, and there are very, very few technology in that field. To my knowledge, there is one from Endo that is an injectable that has been approved, as my understanding.
It received Endo FDA approval 2 weeks ago.
So it's an injectable. And there's another technology that is developed by another company that could be also a game changer. It's a device. It's going to be a 510K. Probably going to be marketed in 2 years. It's being developed by Caroline Van Hove, and it's a startup that have raised quite a significant amount of money from investors to develop the technology. It's going to be also a game changer.
You mentioned $300 million just with the topical, questionably efficacious caffeine. You said
caffeine is the key ingredient.
How big do you think the cellulite market is? If you had to put a number on it, $1. If we could come up with
in terms of revenue?
Yeah, revenue. What are we talking about? If we have a marginally efficacious topical of $300 million in revenue, what do you know what's spent globally on cellulite treatments, or how big that market would be?
So today, the true market is untapped. Because
we don't know the limit.
We don't know
what would be a reasonable assumption?
I think it's in the billions. When I look at the revenue generated by just skincare product, by consumers buying their skincare in pharmacy, and you see that L'Oréal alone is $300 million. So when you add all the other brands, and companies worldwide, you can imagine how big the market is. There's no real therapies or treatment available today. And the only two that have or will demonstrate the efficacy is the Endo technology and Caroline Van Hove new innovative device.
Interesting.
And it's for you. It will be in your hands, and you in your magic hands, you're going to do the treatment. And it's guaranteed results because you can see the before and after right away.
Is that right?
It's not like massaging your leg with a topical, hoping that you're going to impact the dimple. Now, the technology, the Caroline Van Hove technology, you cut the septa, and therefore now you have immediate results.
That's very exciting. And you say that's going to be available, you think, in 2 years?
Yeah, probably 2 years.
So, moving along, you've been in this industry for many, many years. you said you had many of these leaders now that were under you before when you were at Allergan. You mentioned Bob Radigan, you mentioned Carrie Strom, you mentioned Laurent, David Modazetti. So many leaders and CEOs now came up under your tutelage and your guidance. That must be really exciting, as you mentioned, watching them. So now, when you think about the people watching this program and listening, what advice do you have for them? And this could include doctors, it could include industry, management, inventors, finance people. What sort of advice do you have to any of those watching this today?
A couple of advice. First of all, listen. Ideas are out there. Don't think you have all the answers. The answers are somewhere hidden in a small startup, and be humble. Listen to them. Don't have the non-invented here syndrome, which a lot of companies and big pharma have, and be very open-minded, because the technology is out there and could be a great complement to your technology. Sometimes it's not because you have failed at the development of a product that the solution does not exist. We can use, the topical toxin, for example, and dive may be able to crack the code. Mm-hmm. So it's not because you have failed developing the technology that someone else can be successful. Actually, it's the opposite. They can be successful. It's not because you failed that no one else will fail as well. Mm-hmm. Be open-minded. There's a lot of technology out there, and it's not because you're talking to a small startup that they cannot develop a disruptive technology. We haven't talked about it, but there's a company in Israel that has a fat-melting injectable similar to Candela, but with less adverse event and probably better outcome to the patient. Mm-hmm. Small companies, 3 people working there, 2 R&D guys and 1 CEO, and they are, probably able to crack the code that a lot of companies with many more resources and money have not been able to do. So be humble and listen and investigate and talk to the KOLs, especially if you are in the industry. The KOLs, they know because they're in contact with all those little startups. Mm-hmm. They advise them, they test the technology through clinical studies. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Go to their office, look at the injection or the surgery and understand what they're doing and how they're using those new technology. And you have 2 options, acquire early or acquire when it's approved. The sooner the better, because you can put your footprint or on the development, but don't be afraid to ask questions.
Thank you very much. I sure appreciate all this insight from obviously a leader in the whole business of aesthetics. And I want to thank you for coming and the technology of beauty.
It's my pleasure. You asked me to put my crystal ball. I want to add one more thing.
Yes.
I saw something radically different when I was in Paris not too long ago. This was developed by a dermatologist, and it's a robot injecting product. Of course, it's not approved. Of course, it's a prototype.
A robot injecting.
A robot. So you see a lot of spending done for self-driving car. Mm-hmm. It's not ready yet, but probably during our lifetime, we're going to see it coming up, right? 5 years, 10 years.
Amazing.
So you have a self-driving car probably within 5 to 10 years, right?
Yes.
What about a self-injecting device in 5 to 10 years from now?
That would be amazing.
So it's very early stage, but it exists. And if you're a leader in this industry, you have to look at that. You have to take out your crystal ball and be open-minded and say, yeah, today what I'm doing myself might be done by a robot tomorrow, under my supervision, under an AI, artificial intelligence.
Yes.
But like my car, being in my car and it's going to self-drive me, I might be in the office and this robot might self-inject under my supervision.
That's very exciting.
That's the future.
Yeah, it's hard to believe R2-D2 could be injecting our patients.
Right.
Well, thank you once again, and thank you all for joining us here at the Technology of Beauty. Take care.